as you carry your last suitcase out to the car, does it help you to know God has a bigger place for you down the road that's going to cost you less? Does it help? Maybe a little bit. Maybe it does. Does it make you happy about being in the situation you're in? Be honest. Probably not. Probably not. Peter isn't saying be happy about it. But he is trying to encourage us to think about things in a slightly different way, in slightly different terms. And that may help. His point is that all of these things we're going through in life, all of them, can have the effect of proving our faith. This is what he says in his letter. Thus, the term trial or test is applicable. There are many different ways that a trial can prove or grow our faith. I'm only going to address 3 of them. I'm sure you can think of others. I'm going to address 3. The first is the same way that Yeshua's faith was tested on the cross. Okay? After hours of humiliation, beaten, humiliated, almost to the point of death, he's brutally nailed to a cross, lifted up in public disgrace between 2 thieves. At noon, the world goes dark, as even God, the Father, could no longer look upon his Son, who had literally become sin for the world. Can't look on it. For 3 hours, the world is dark. As Yeshua prepares to die, the lights come back on. And if there were ever a time that somebody might understand if Yeshua had turned away from his Father, that would have been the moment. After the humiliation and the crucifixion and the turning away, the forsakenness, you might think, well, you know what? I wouldn't do it, but I understand why Yeshua did. But that's not what happened. Instead, Yeshua says, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. My God, why have you forsaken me? He's still claiming God is his God. He says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. And he says, into your hands I commend my spirit. So after all of this, the ultimate test or trial, Yeshua's faith remained intact. Faith in God the Father, that his plan is sovereign and has everything under control, even to his death. It's that faith that eventually defeats the enemy. It's in this faithfulness to his Father, Yeshua defeats the evil one for good. During hard times, and I will promise you, no matter how hard or dark our times get, they will never get as hard or as dark as the times for Yeshua the Messiah on the cross. Never. During hard times, times of darkness, times of discouragement, our faith grows when we simply trust in the Lord to get us through it. When he does, our faith is proven. When our faith is proven, it gives us one more thing that we can add to our testimony of how the Lord provides for us. And in that testimony of God's faithfulness, our faith, as Peter puts it in his letter, is found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Yeshua the Messiah. That's the first way. Another way is usually tied to the first, is seen in our prayers and how God answers them. Let's go back to Yeshua's picture, the perfect picture. The illustration here is of Yeshua in the garden. Remember, it's after Passover. They have had their Passover Seder, and Yeshua goes into the garden. He's got 2 guards posted at the front, okay? And this is before his betrayal. And he prays to the Father. He says, Father, may this cup pass from me, yet not my will be done, your will be done. So he asks the Father to take the cup away from him, though he's willing to accept what happens if he doesn't. He's willing to accept whatever God's will is in the situation. In a dark and desperate situation, the ultimate life and death example, if you will, Yeshua's prayer was answered. God answered him. The answer, though, was, no, my son, that's your cup. There are plenty of times when things are looking not so good that we pray to God. And God fixes them. We don't deserve it. He does it anyway. And yes, that's grace. But even more, it is approving of our faith. It's an encouragement that God does that all the time. In our displeasure with a given set of circumstances, we're not happy with the way things are. Our plea to the Lord is that he would somehow change those circumstances. That's the first thing. Lord, I don't like where I'm working. Do something about it. I don't like who I work for. Fire them. Bring somebody new in. I don't like where I'm living. Move me. I don't like the congregation I'm going to. Help me start a new one. In situations where we don't like our circumstances, we pray to the Lord that he would change our circumstances. Sometimes he does. Sometimes he simply changes us to be able to get through the circumstances we happen to be in, which is where it connects to that first example. If he does change the circumstances, if he chooses to change them, our faith grows because he has given us yet another example of how he hears prayer and how he cares and how he's willing and able to involve himself in our lives. And that's an encouragement, and it proves and tests our faith. And with that realization, our faith is found to result, again, as Peter said, in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Yeshua, the Messiah. That's the second way. Here's the last way I'm going to talk about. The last example is in the case where the trials become directive. In these situations, though, we don't usually realize it while we're in the middle of the situation. These are things where after the whole thing is done, we look back and we say, oh, that's what he was doing. That happens quite often. It usually doesn't happen until we've reached a point along our journey where we look back and we say, oh, if that had never happened, I would never be where I am today. This is the case of people where people are evicted from their homes, let's say, only to find out a month or two later, while sitting in the living room of their new home that they had found, which incidentally had just come on the market the day that they had gotten evicted, that as it turns out, the house that they had been evicted from turned out to be infected by bugs and was condemned the week after they were evicted. Was it fun being evicted? No. After seeing how the Lord used it to bless them, though, faith grows. Now let's look at the case of Joseph and David, our Torah and Haftorah portion, and see what happened with them. Joseph had a rough life. In fact, Joseph is what we call the model or the type of the suffering servant. The things that happened to him at somebody else's doing. He didn't do it himself. Joseph sold into slavery. Remember that story? His brothers, the very people who you would think would be the most helpful, the most likely to protect him, the most likely to help him, the most likely to love him, are the ones who did it. So he finds himself in Egypt, a servant, a slave, in jail. And each step along the way, because of his faithfulness, God blesses him. The key is that Joseph gives God the glory. in everything. And we know the story. He suffers. God blesses him, encouraging him. And Joseph continues to have faith and continues to let his faith guide him. Now, when all is said and done for Joseph, just